What does it mean for projects of US imperialism when the project for a new American century has lost faith in what you're doing? Well, it means two things. It means, firstly, curtains for the project in question, Iran, but also, as we shall see, it means that the prospects for American empire are extremely grim uh, in unprecedented ways. Okay, so let's dive into it. So let's refresh our memories. Okay, so what is the Project for a New American Century? The Project for a New American Century is an American neoconservative think tank, a foreign policy, mainly foreign policy oriented, but not completely, think tank that had a vision at the end of the 20th century for the century of American power that was going to come. It was an extremely violent vision, an extremely warlike vision, and one that saw certain preconditions as essential to maintaining American power. Principally, the containment of China, the um, kind of the way they saw the rise of China was that America had made something of a kind of like a Faustian pact to access Chinese manufacturing in the 1990s, and now this was spiraling out of control. And there needed to be an almost permanent state of war. There were a number of key enemies: Iran, Iraq, Syria, and North Korea, but also other key menaces like Libya. All countries, with the exception of North Korea, perhaps, North Korea as a nuclear armed state was the one that was never attacked. But all countries, obviously, with strategic oil reserves, and all countries that had it at some point attempted paths of national self-determination to differing degrees. And the Project for a New American Century viewed these as extremely dubious. The Project for a New American Century was a unilateralist project. It essentially said, and George W. Bush, who was guided by this, essentially said, well, if Europeans wish to tag along, then they can do and prove their merits and worth to us. But America has the capacity to act unilaterally permanently, and should have the capacity to fight and win two major wars at once. Um, and that was the kind of the American equivalent of like the British two power standard at the end of the 19th century. And I think a lot of the Project for a New American Century was informed by looking at British imperial decline and thinking of ways to avoid that. So the project for a new American century was principally how we get Iraq in 2003 and Afghanistan in 2002 and the war on terror. Um, the much of this was planned long before 9/11, and or I say if not planned, as in there was some fiendish document in the president's drawer ready to go, but theorized, suggested, and no doubt there were other models for American imperialism theorized and suggested as well, currently gathering dust in Pentagon filing cabinets and things like that. What we shouldn't do is do this kind of deterministic, kind of teleological approach, saying, ah, ha, ha, look, they had a clever master plan, and look, they put it into practice, and that one therefore equals the other. Well, all sorts of things may well have been presented in the post 9/11 moment, but this happens to be the one that is the one that went ahead. The Project for a New American Century was, as a think tank, informed Cheney, Rumsfeld. It's written by some of their key goons, Wolfowitz, people like that. And it is the key briefing document, the Project for a New American Century, is written by some of the kind of the key figures in the neoconservative movement. Now, that all out of the way, there's one more thing to say. Top of the list, even over Iraq, even over Syria, even over North Korea as the enemy, the hated enemy, is Iran. And anything that could bring about the destruction of the Islamic Republic is highly sought after, prized. Seizing Iraq is kind of like a prelude to a war on Iran in the eyes of the neocons. Obviously, the seizure of Iraq enhanced Iranian power, and Israel is a key player in the Project for a New American Century. It is the kind of the airstrip in the Middle East. Obviously, Israeli influence, the influence of people like Netanyahu over particularly Biden and Trump has kind of inverted that in many ways. America is now in many ways more of a tool for Israel than the other way around. But Iran was always in the gun sights, number one of the neocons, and no doubt in large part due to the humiliations Iran heaped upon America in 1979. So what does it mean when in the Atlantic periodical magazine, kind of the house magazine for a slightly more liberal iteration of neoconservatism, slightly less kind of vulgar and aggressive than that proposed by Cheney and Rumsfeld, what does it mean when Robert Kagan, a key figure, perhaps the key figure in the Project for a New American Century, has said that Iran is now a catastrophe of unprecedented proportions? It means a huge amount. It's rather like the October Revolution happened, Lenin having fought the Civil War and looked at the results and said, oh, well, perhaps a more muted form of social democracy might have been a better idea. This is hugely significant. In the article, and I paraphrase, Kagan has basically said, firstly, the war is unwinnable. Iran has effectively won the war. They will never let go of the Straits of Hormuz. They have inverted everything that previously existed. They have taken their control of the Straits, has turned it from a passageway of free navigation to the world's most significant global pinch point. They will let through regimes that pay, and they will let through regimes that they like. And regimes that they do not like will be punished, will be effectively economically starved. And it puts Iran, reading between the lines, I think what he's suggesting is it puts Iran potentially in a position of unprecedented global power and global economic power. And Iranians would be, the Islamic Republic and its leaders would be fools to do anything other than use this for maximum leverage. And Trump knows this. He goes on to say that this has epic consequences for American empire. This means that America is done in the Persian Gulf. And there's something else that's not in that particular document. I'll come up relating to Saudi Arabia that I'm going to come on to in a little bit. But he says essentially that America not only cannot project power into the Gulf, but also it's presented itself as an unreliable ally. So countries like Taiwan and Japan will not hesitate to break ties with America if necessary. If a more powerful regional predator decides that they are fair game. Here is how I imagine the shape of maybe the next 20 years, maybe it's 30 years, to kind of unfold as this key crisis dissolves Pax Americana, the American peace from 1945 onwards. That you'll have regional powers, large aggressive regional powers, calling the shots. There will be spheres of interest and zones of interest. There will be the smaller powers will have no choice than to make nice with bigger powers. I would imagine that Taiwan, the Koreas, Japan, the Philippines maybe, will need to find their accommodation with China. Of course, as far as big powers are concerned, what Iran and Ukraine have shown us is that with relatively small amounts of military spending on things like drones, you can bog big powers down in long, bloody, futile wars and cause them immense damage. So, on one hand, large regional aggressors might not necessarily have everything stacked in their favor all the time. They might be very mindful that they don't want to be bogged down into a Ukraine, which will cause them immense problems. So there might be opportunities for kind of fragile pieces here and there, which is always a good thing. America, by implication from Kagan's article, will now withdraw from multiple arenas, and America will be able to safeguard and fortify itself, but it will not be able to operate like an imperial power, and that is a kind of an epic, perhaps the epic turning point, inflection moment in the 21st century. The scale of the disaster in the Gulf has been commented on by people on the left. I mean, sure, that's almost a given. But before now, the neocons themselves, the people who advocated this, have not spoken up. Now, there is a corollary to Kagan's article, and hats off to the neocon movement for never never walking away from an insane proposition. But he essentially says at the end of the article, well, there is one thing you could do, and that would be like a massive generational land and air war in Iran, where America invades and occupies the entire country forever. But that is because that is completely impossible. I mean, on so many levels, I would need to do a whole other half-hour podcast just to explain every single reason why that's impossible. In a way, Kagan is his kind of when he's proposing something so ridiculous. Not only does he tell you an awful lot about the neocons and how deluded they are, but also he's kind of essentially answering his own question that yes, American empire, at least in the Persian Gulf, is over, and that will have a kind of a domino effect everywhere else as America shows that it is in many ways a kind of a paper tiger, and cannot defend regional allies. And therefore, its infrastructure of bases and its infrastructure of strategic partnerships is fraying and close to collapse. But if the only answer is the most unwinnable war since Napoleon invaded Russia, or since Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, then the writing is very much on the wall. There is no kind of direction other than complete and utter retreat and rout. Now, this in the Atlantic was significant, but there is something else. I think this is Wall Street Journal or perhaps Bloomberg, one of those kinds of big and kind of fairly credible America, again, in no way radical, American center-right, their politics is kind of center-rightish news outlets reported from the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia's brother, cousin, I think, head of Saudi intelligence, or former head of Saudi intelligence, saying that they view America and Israel essentially as aggressors.
From athletic stuff like a full court pickup game, swish, to athletic-ish stuff like a half-mile stroll. Get those steps in. Head to Sierra or Sierra.com for the brands you want at the prices that let you do it all. From athletic to athletic-ish, Sierra's got it.
At Nature's Bounty, the belief is simple. You already have a brilliant body. Supplements just help support your journey. For over 50 years, Nature's Bounty has offered vitamins and supplements to help you eat, sleep, thrive, repeat. From magnesium glycinate for heart and muscle support to hair growth capsules for fuller, thicker hair. And probiotics with 20 billion live cultures for digestion. Nature's Bounty. It's in your nature to thrive. Learn more at naturesbounty.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
This is extraordinary. A relationship that was forged between the Saud family and America by Franklin Roosevelt, no less, during World War II. The King of Saudi Arabia and Roosevelt took tea on an American warship together, where they essentially came up with an almost century-long alliance, which gave America first refusal on Saudi oil, and also gave Saudi Arabia an open guarantee from America of protection. It is the conclusion of the Saudis that the whole point of the attack on Iran, and I suspect this was probably an Israeli conceit, was to draw Saudi into a war with Iran. The main beneficiary of all of that would, of course, be Israel. And not only had they clearly, in the eyes of the Saudis, tried to do this, but they had failed as well. They had shown their abject weakness in front of Iran. Now, the Saudis and the Iranians don't get on, and you have a fundamentalist Shia regime in Iran and a fundamentalist Sunni regime in Saudi. There was a bit in Robert Fisk's book, The Great Wolf of Civilization, where in the 1980s he was talking to, I think, a member of the Saudi royal family who said, well, people go on about the Saudi kind of Islamic revolution. We had our Islamic revolution here long, long ago. We do all the things that they do. And we are Sunnis and allied to America, and they're Shia and definitely not. And that way you kind of see one of the kind of the dividing lines in the Middle East is really about kind of poles of American influence. I mean, of course, there's all sorts to say about the schisms between Shia and Sunni Islam, and I will leave that conversation for when we get somebody who's far more knowledgeable about it than me on the podcast. Hopefully, we will do. However, one of the kind of defining features of the Middle East in the second half of the 20th century is allegiances. Who is allied to America? So it takes a special talent, someone like Trump, for example, to rip apart a set of alliances that had been sacrosanct to American power in the Middle East. There are all sorts of kind of conspiracy theories that Trump is kind of knows all about what he's doing and is sort of paid to do these sorts of things, and this is all a kind of a clever job to transform America into a more isolationist state. Well, I don't think any mandarin of American state power, any CIA man, any oligarch sets out to make their country weaker and more incapable, and they will miss influence in the Persian Gulf when it's gone. And when it is gone, it will go forever. What the Saudis will probably do here is make some sort of arrangement and some kind of understanding with Iran. And the Gulf states will do so as well. America has withdrawn its bases in the Gulf states because many of them were hit by Iranian missiles, and that is part of the kind of the Great Retreat from the Gulf. This vitally important part of the world. The kind of implications for America, for American world power, essentially expelled from the Gulf, are staggering, almost too great to contemplate. So we have now Trump, who is still in this kind of never-ending cycle of threats, negotiations, summits, and bluff and bluster, desperate to get himself out of the situation, desperate to reverse from the situation, desperate to do something to other than accept complete and utter abject defeat, something his kind of tormented ego can't really tolerate. And Iran doesn't really have to do an awful lot. Iran has to simply use its devastating weapon, which is time. It just has to wait, and America hasn't got time. The economic tsunami that this has triggered will hit America just like it will hit everywhere else. And America has shown itself now to be not only just to its enemies, but to its allies as well, as being completely unreliable and completely untrustworthy, acting unilaterally. So the key takeaway here is that the neocons, the people like Kagan, don't write these things on a whim. This is all thought out as a kind of like a statement by the organization about how they see things. And the project for a new American century, I presume, is now, well, after the end of George W. Bush, it was a hole below the waterline. But I presume this is some kind of indication that they accepted that there is no project for a new American century. Perhaps the project for a new American century now is a withdrawal from empire to a more nation-based orientation. But we shall see, and that probably won't happen under Trump. Anyway, happy Mondays, folks, and I will catch you a bit later on. I'll try and get a few episodes out this week. I think we've got an interview coming on Wednesday for you, so stay tuned. Take care, everyone. All the best. Bye bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of Explaining History. This podcast is an independent production, and it's listener support that keeps these conversations going week after week. If you find value in the show and want to help cover the costs of research and production, please consider making a contribution. You can join our community on Patreon or make a one-off donation. Just follow the links in the show notes for this episode. Every bit of support is truly appreciated. Thanks again for listening.